So I'll leave it to Liz to talk a bit more about her experience and some advice for you.
Hi everyone. So I'm probably again a bit different from what people have been talking about today. So I've got a Bachelor of Science from Otago University, and then I did my Masters in Resource and Environmental Planning at Massey University. I guess one of the things that got me into transport planning and transport was originally I trained, I guess, I did my Masters in Resource and Environmental Planning, and I thought, what do? I really like transport, but I do like planning as well. And I did have 2 years in a consultancy doing planning, but then I went back and did transport planning. And one of the things that I really like about it is the fact that Jared talked about solving problems. For me, I think they call it the inexact science. So I feel like for me, the thing that drives me is that you feel like you can make a difference to people's lives and you can see what you're doing on the ground. And yeah, I guess it depends on what drives you. It's quite interesting. So I'm a planner. Most of my bosses it's quite interesting, most of my bosses have actually been from England or from overseas, even though I spent 4 years working in New Zealand and then all the rest over in the UK. My first boss had a PhD in pure maths, and then my other bosses have been engineers, and I think I've had one planner and then economists as well, so a real mixture of different people. So I'm just going to show you some pretty pictures really about what I've been doing. So I started off after I finished university doing things like bus priority. Also, the other thing I did is, and when you're at university, don't ever be afraid to just think as big as you like. I mean, that's the thing that I try and do. If I think there's a problem or there's something that I think can make a difference, don't be afraid of asking those questions. So I did my master's thesis on trying to quantify community severance, and then from there I actually did further work on it when I started my first job. Then I worked on bus priority. I've also worked a lot on freight as well, and it's not, in New Zealand at the moment, freight is a bit of a silent mode. We do talk about it a bit, but there's so many cool things you can do with freight. I've worked on a rubbish truck trial in the UK where all of the trucks were fueled by used cooking oil, and we also did cargo bike trials as well. We did all sorts of different things because freight is something you can't survive without. And then in terms of taxis, again, we've got Uber coming up, we've got lots of other things like car sharing. I also got involved with looking at that. But basically, actually you can't see the top of the slide, but one of the things that I did start doing, and I've sort of divided my presentation into about 4 different areas, but strategy and planning, looking towards the future. So Jared talked about solving problems. I look about where do we want our future to be. We can see some problems, but where do we actually want to be, and then working back from there. So one of the areas that I worked on in London was working for Transport for London, which has 30,000 different people, working for a cool man or a crazy man, Boris Johnson, who was amazing to work for, but sometimes, no matter how many times you briefed him, he'd just go off piste. And you could be in a room like this, and suddenly you'd see his face pressed against the wall, and he'd be just looking in, being a bit nosy to see what people are up to. But I also worked in terms of strategy and planning. We looked for the 30-year planning cycle, where London should be, the most livable city like Auckland, but also what do we need to do, and looking at public transport. We also looked at the problems that we had in terms of air pollution and CO2, and one of the things that I led on over there, which is coming in 2020, was a low emission zone or ultra low emission zone for all vehicles coming into central London. So basically, if you've got a diesel vehicle, in 2020, it has to either be 5 years old or you're going to be fined something like $200 a day. So it's quite a big change. We had to negotiate with the European Union, and we also had to negotiate with the crazy taxi companies and all sorts of people because it impacts on everyone. And so I guess, as Jared said and other people have said, you need to, with my job and with all of our jobs, you've got to be able to get on with people. There's no one is going to ever be 100% happy with what you're going to be talking about or trying to get them to work on, but it's about finding a happy medium. and pushing people as well. One of the other areas that I was lucky enough to work on, so I worked in London for local government and Transport for London, which is a regional authority. I worked for a council called Camden Council, which is right in the heart of London, and it's probably got about 350,000 people. During that time, they had one of the biggest redevelopments in Europe, which was the redevelopment of the King's Cross area. So we were really lucky to have that. As part of that, there were redesigns of stations, so you can get involved with all sorts of things. You can get involved with strategy doing transport, but you can get involved with research, but you can also get involved with a lot of the master planning and also design. So I was involved with a lot of that, and again, it's worked quite well. And what's interesting is success breeds success, so the redevelopment of King's Cross has worked out really well. Now Google is there. There's lots of people that are moving from the heart of London into this whole area, and it's really interesting. There was lots of crime and prostitution, and now the whole area has completely redeveloped, and it's now created a proper place. Other pictures here, you can see the buses. That's Oxford Street there, which is probably one of the busiest shopping streets in the world, and with the double-decker buses. With that, it looks quite cool, but you see the buses going through there. One of the challenges I had to work on was that's got one of the highest air pollution rates in Europe through there, and that's where all the people are. So what do you do? And so we were working on a plan and a master plan of what do you do with those buses. Do you bring them in as electric, which they are doing, and what else can you do, or do you move them away? At the same time that this was happening, a rail project called Crossrail, which was a new east-west link, was also happening. So huge construction going on. Buses were also being diverted because they forgot that you need to check for utilities if you're going to build a big construction project, that perhaps you might want to do a bit of digging around to find out if there are some pipes and things down there. So not only is that really busy, they then had to shut the road for 18 months because they forgot to check very well for the utilities. So buses were getting diverted through communities. So you work a lot with communities and things like that. Another picture down there, you can see the Shard. It's got the best view if you're a man, and the toilets right at the top. You can sit there and read the paper if you want to do that. But that was a big redevelopment. Again, often you redevelop things linking in with a transport plan and a master plan, and you can also use your development to harness in funding for public transport benefits. So the station got redeveloped as well. And what's interesting there is that there will be a new bridge in the future, which, because you often deal with politics, as I said with Boris Johnson, there was an exchange of tulips between him and Joanna Lumley a few years ago, and she now wants a pedestrian bridge somewhere along through here, and called the Garden Bridge, and it was for no reason. The benefit cost wasn't there at all. It was a bit of a waste of money, but because of politics and Boris and Joanna's relationship, it's going ahead. So you get all sorts of different things, but you've got to go with the flow, but it's also about taking all your opportunities as well. We've already touched on about urban design, but one of the things I've been lucky enough to do is, I guess, I've had a real mixture, I guess, in my career of strategy and planning, actual resource consent planning, but then actual engineering design and urban design as well. And so some of these schemes are schemes that I was involved with. Some of them are shared space, but some of them are just completely redeveloping an area. The one in the middle is an area called Seven Dials, which is an old historic area right near Covent Garden in London. All of the sets within that street, they all had to be hand laid, and there were challenges with the very vociferous local community, and I had to ban one of the residents who was harassing one of the construction workers from the street. But you get all sorts of things going on, but you also get some amazing achievements. We had huge uplift in all of these areas once we did the improvements. So businesses who originally are sceptical, they think they're going to lose money, ended up putting contributions in to new developments and saying, hey, what can we partner on? Because we can make a difference too, and we want to actually get more value from our from our properties, and we want more businesses to come here. So it's one thing I really learned in the UK is that the more that you can partner up with people, you can harness in more money and get really good benefits. The interesting thing here is this is a shared space scheme, and it was one where the politician sort of drove it. It's a bit mixed in terms of some of its messages. You can see crisscrosses all through here. It's called Exhibition Road, and then because the politician who led it was a bit vain, he also put the lights through there as well because he just kept putting more and more things in there, and it's made it a bit cluttered, and so cars don't really treat it as a shared space scheme, and so they roar through there quite quickly. But what's interesting is, as I mentioned, is about working with partners and politicians, is that the guy who sort of led on that scheme, the politician, he launched it, and he was on an elephant when he launched it. I mean, so you get all sorts that you have to deal with, and you just have to keep dealing with it. And it's wasteful, but you just have to put it up and just go with it, because often you do get the great scheme in the end. So as Jensen mentioned before, one of the other things that I've really got into probably since 2005 is the innovations sort of side of things, and research and innovation. That's probably where my real passion lies. Not being afraid about failing, and I think that's one thing that we need to learn, is that you should always keep trying and asking questions, write it down, learn from those things. Evidence-based approach is really nice, because then you can learn from it, make your case, and then keep going. I managed an innovation precinct called Clear Zones in London, and it started off as a European initiative. Then we lost funding for it because the whole program had finished, and then we started looking at other alternatives. And so some of the things that we did there was the cycle hire scheme for London. So it was it's probably about a half-hour walk either side through the pink area. So we trialled the cycle hire scheme, other shared space schemes. We trialled some of the first electric charging points in the UK, 20 mile per hour zones, all sorts of things. Pollution eating paving, so paving that sucked up nitrogen dioxide and spat it out into nitrates. It worked if you're a mouse, but not if you're a person. So we learnt from that. Some of the other cities in the UK didn't wait for our research, and so ended up paving all of their town centre with this paving, which cost another $20 per square metre. So it's all about learning from it, and even some failures you can learn from and save you money or things like that. But through this precinct as well, we trialled hydrogen taxis and other things too. So and the thing is, it's all about trialling things, finding out if it works. If it doesn't, move on. But sometimes it's about opportunities, and sometimes it's about having a vision. But this area was also had planning policy behind it too, so it meant that developers, anyone who developed there, had to also provide contributions to the clear zone for sustainable transport measures, and we called it a testing zone, so we learnt a lot from there. But yeah, all I can say is I love what I do, and that would probably be one of the biggest things that I'd say to you guys is do what makes you happy. As far as I'm concerned, obviously you need to be paid, but do what makes you really happy. Through my career, I've got lots of friends who've gone off and done different things, but often it's the things that we do in transport where you're feeling like you make a difference, and people can be sitting in banking or PwC, sorry Jared, not Jared because he's happy, but and they do make me money, but then they go, but I want to do what you do, and it's like you do actually feel like you make a difference, and everywhere you look you can see things that you've been involved in. And the world's your oyster, and that's why I really like transport as opposed to other types of planning or other things, is you're really flexible and you can work on lots of different things.